Submarines do not surface. That is the first rule of submarine warfare. The moment a submarine surfaces, it loses everything that makes it dangerous. It loses invisibility. It loses the element of surprise. It becomes a target. Every submarine commander on Earth knows this. It is not a guideline. It is the foundational logic of the entire weapons system. So when the United States Navy publicly announced that a nuclear-powered submarine had transited the Strait of Hormuz on the surface, in daylight, with its identification visible, the question every analyst should have been asking is not what the submarine was doing there. The question is, why America wanted Iran to see it. Because that submarine was not a weapon. It was a message. And understanding that message requires understanding something about nuclear submarines that most people watching the news coverage never stop to consider. If that message matters to you, if you would rather understand the signal, subscribe, because the pundits covered the transit. Nobody explained what it meant. To understand what America sent into Hormuz and why surfacing it was the entire point, you need to understand what a Virginia-class nuclear submarine actually is. It is longer than a football field. It displaces nearly 8,000 tons when submerged. That is heavier than 6 fully loaded Boeing 747s stacked on top of each other. It runs on a nuclear reactor that never needs refueling for the entire lifespan of the vessel. It can stay submerged for months. The crew runs out of food before the submarine runs out of power. It moves through the water at speeds that are classified but estimated by open-source analysts at better than 25 knots submerged, faster than most surface ships, silent enough that passive sonar systems struggle to detect it at combat ranges. It carries Tomahawk cruise missiles. Each one flies at 500 miles per hour at low altitude. Each one navigates to within meters of a target using GPS guidance. Each one carries a warhead capable of destroying a reinforced concrete building. A Virginia-class submarine carries up to 40 of them in its vertical launch tubes, plus torpedoes, plus the ability to support Special Operations Forces insertion. This is not a patrol boat. This is not a destroyer. This is one of the most lethal single weapons platforms ever constructed by any nation in the history of warfare. And America drove it through the Strait of Hormuz on the surface so that Iranian surveillance could photograph it, report it, and make sure the right people in Tehran understood exactly what had just passed through their waters. Now address the question every viewer is already thinking. Why surface it at all? If the submarine is more dangerous underwater, why not just send it submerged and let Iran wonder whether it is there? Because wondering is not the same as knowing. And this deployment was not about capability. It was about communication. There are two ways to send a military message. The first is classified. You move assets quietly. The adversary may or may not detect them. The signal is ambiguous. The second is public. You move assets visibly. You confirm the deployment through official channels. You make sure the photographs exist and circulate. The signal is unambiguous. America chose unambiguous. Here is the strategic logic that makes that choice significant. Iran has spent 40 years studying American naval doctrine. They understand carrier strike groups. They have built their entire anti-access architecture around the assumption that American power projection means surface ships, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, the weapons architecture Iran built at Hormuz, the mobile missile launchers in the Zagros mountains, the fast attack craft in island coves, the mines in the shipping lanes, all of it is optimized against surface targets. A nuclear submarine operates in a completely different threat environment. It does not travel through the 6 nautical mile surface corridor where Iranian mines are concentrated. It travels submerged through the full 21 nautical mile width of the strait where mine density is lower and fast boat attacks are irrelevant. Iranian anti-ship missiles are designed to hit surface targets. They cannot engage a submerged contact. The entire weapons architecture Iran constructed to threaten the strait has almost no capability against a nuclear submarine operating at depth. This is the asymmetry that the surface transit communicated. Iran built a trap. The trap works against surface ships. We have assets that the trap does not affect. And we just showed you one of them. Now run the equation on what that message costs Iran. For 40 years, the Islamic Republic has maintained domestic credibility on one core claim. We can close Hormuz. We have built the weapons and the doctrine to make the strait too dangerous for American naval power. That claim has supported every piece of IRGC recruitment, every defense budget request, every strategic communication to Iranian allies and proxies across the region. The surface transit of a Virginia-class submarine does not destroy that claim with a missile. It destroys it with mathematics. Because the moment Iran's surveillance photographs that submarine transiting the corridor it cannot threaten, the IRGC commanders have to answer a question they have never had to answer publicly before. What is your plan against something your missiles cannot reach, your mines cannot touch, and your fast boats cannot approach? The answer is that they do not have one. And now everyone in the region who needs to evaluate Iranian deterrence claims knows that. This is the insight that most coverage of the transit missed entirely. The submarine was not sent to Hormuz to sink anything. It was sent to Hormuz to be seen. The visibility was the mission. The surface transit was the strike. And it was a strike against the credibility of 40 years of Iranian strategic positioning at zero cost to America and zero risk to the crew. But here is where the equation gets more complicated. And this is the part that explains why the timing of the transit matters as much as the transit itself. The deployment did not happen in isolation. It happened in the context of a specific set of Iranian decisions about Hormuz that had shifted the regional calculation in ways Tehran did not fully anticipate. Iran had declared the strait closed. Iranian state media ran the footage. IRGC commanders gave press conferences threatening any vessel that attempted transit. The closure was supposed to demonstrate Iranian power. It was supposed to create economic pressure on the global oil market severe enough to force diplomatic concessions. What it actually demonstrated was the equation we covered in the previous video. 100% of Iranian oil exports pass through Hormuz. The closure eliminated Iranian oil revenue at approximately $100 million per day, while creating a geopolitical crisis that justified the deployment of additional American assets to the region. Iran closed the strait to create leverage. The closure created the justification for the submarine transit. The transit eliminated the credibility of the closure threat. Iran's move generated the American response that undermined Iran's position. Run that sequence again slowly because this is the strategic trap that Iran walked into. Step 1. Iran threatens to close Hormuz to create leverage. Step 2. Iran closes Hormuz and eliminates its own oil revenue. Step 3. The closure justifies American asset deployment. Step 4. The asset deployment demonstrates that American military options are not constrained by the anti-access architecture Iran built to constrain them. Step 5. Iran's leverage claim is undermined at the exact moment Iran needs it most because its oil revenue has stopped. That is not a military defeat. That is a strategic miscalculation that compounds itself at every step. And it happened because Iran was running the wrong equation. Iran calculated that closing Hormuz would create economic pain for America. America produces 13.3 million barrels of oil per day. It does not need Iranian oil or Gulf oil at the volumes it once did. The economic pain from the closure falls primarily on China, Japan, South Korea, and India. Countries that depend on Gulf oil and pay nothing toward the security of the corridor that delivers it. America experiences the closure as a geopolitical problem requiring a military response. That response costs money, but generates strategic benefits, including the opportunity to demonstrate capabilities that reshape Iranian threat assessments for years. Iran experiences the closure as the elimination of its primary government revenue source with no timeline for recovery. The asymmetry is not tactical, it is not military, it is arithmetic. And the submarine transit is the physical expression of that arithmetic made visible. Now address the objection I can already hear. One submarine transit does not change the strategic balance. Iran still has its missiles, its fast boats, its mines, its proxies. One submarine appearing on the surface and then disappearing does not eliminate those capabilities. That objection is correct. And it misses the point. The submarine transit was not designed to eliminate Iranian capabilities. It was designed to change Iranian calculations specifically to change the calculation Iranian commanders make when they assess whether threatening Hormuz closure creates leverage or creates vulnerability. Before the transit, Iranian doctrine assumed that American reluctance to engage at Hormuz reflected the effectiveness of Iranian anti-access weapons. We built the trap. America will not enter the trap. Therefore, the trap works. After the transit, Iranian commanders must account for the possibility that American reluctance to engage reflects not the effectiveness of the trap, but the availability of alternatives to the trap. We did not enter your corridor. We went around it. Underwater, with a platform your weapons cannot reach. That shift in calculation is worth more than any missile strike, because it is a shift that does not regenerate. Every weapon system can be rebuilt if the factories are funded. A strategic miscalculation, once demonstrated, cannot be undiscovered. Iran knows we have nuclear submarines. They have always known. But knowing a capability exists in the abstract, and watching it transit your most important strategic choke point on the surface as a deliberate signal are completely different categories of information. The first is a fact in an intelligence file. The second is a message delivered in steel to whoever needs to understand that the equation has changed. Here is what comes next. Not as prediction, as arithmetic. Iran must now account for submarine presence in every tactical calculation it makes about Hormuz, every fast boat deployment, every mine-laying operation, every missile launch decision. All of them now occur in an environment where a Virginia-class submarine may be positioned within tomahawk range of the target. The distance from the submarine's position to any IRGC facility in the Hormuz region is measured in minutes of flight time. Not hours, minutes. That time compression changes the risk calculation for every Iranian military action in the region. Not because the submarine will necessarily respond to every provocation, because it might. And the cost of being wrong is the destruction of the target from a weapon that cannot be intercepted, fired from a platform that cannot be located, by a crew that will never know they were threatened. This is deterrence, not the threat of overwhelming force, the demonstrated certainty that a specific capability exists in a specific place, and that the cost of provoking it exceeds the benefit of the provocation. The submarine surfaced, so Iran would know it was there. It will submerge, so Iran cannot track it. The message has been delivered. The uncertainty begins. And uncertainty is the most powerful weapon in the deterrence arsenal. Because uncertainty is the one variable that no amount of fast boats, mines, or IRGC press conferences can eliminate. Iran built 40 years of strategic leverage on the claim that it controls Hormuz. We just drove through Hormuz in a vessel that Iran's 40 years of weapons development cannot touch. That is not firepower. That is geometry. That is the difference between a threat and a demonstration. And demonstrations do not require press conferences. If you now see the signal instead of the transit. If you understand why surfacing was the mission and the submarine was the message, share this with someone who read the headline and missed the strategy. And if you want to understand what Iran does next when the leverage calculation no longer works, that video is already waiting for you.